What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Talking in Ovals podcast. Running fans, throwing fans, jumping fans, all around athletic fans, you are all welcome here. Hello. Hope you are having a wonderful Monday, September 19th of 2022. Before we get into the fun stuff, before I bring Hyatt in here and say hello to him, like, share, follow, subscribe, give us a rate 5 stars on Spotify and iTunes. Spread this word of mouth to all your other trackies, running nerds, jumping, throwing people that love all that type of stuff. Let them know the best damn track running podcast all around that you can hear is right here. And we are the best for a few reasons. And I'm going to start saying that, Hyatt. We are the best. We're just going to throw that out there. We're going to lay the gauntlet down to every other running and track podcast. But Hyatt, how are you? How's everything going?
I am so excited as a former distance runner and coach. The fall season cross country, I cannot wait to see all these kids run. College, high school, it's going to be fantastic.
Yeah, we've noted a little bit that the cross-country season's already gotten underway around the country, and the times have just been absolutely incredible coming out of the high school ranks, and, college is getting underway, really. So it's about to get really, really exciting. And one of the reasons that I laid the gauntlet down saying we are one of the best, if not the best track running podcast around is because we are pulling some of the best quality damn guests that you can have anywhere. With us today, Jonathan Gault, staff writer for LetsRun.com. And I have to say, I'm not just trying to blow smoke up your ass at all, Jonathan. I apologize if it seems that way, but you're not only one of the better running and writers in the nation, you are very underrated, right? I think you're one of the better sports writers around, because I think the art of sports writing has kind of gone awry in a lot of places, but you've kept it very good in your discipline. So I have to give you a complete compliment with that.
Oh, man, that's the best intro I could have asked for. So thank you, Alex. Very kind.
Yeah, I really appreciate you coming on. Now, first things first, I want people to kind of know, people that don't know, if you're listening to this and you're a running fan, if you don't know who Jonathan Gault is, shame on you. But first, I want to ask, how long have you been writing for LetsRun.com? Where were you kind of before this? Kind of give us Jonathan Gault's little origin story here.
Yeah, LetsRun.com is really my only real job. I had a couple internships in journalism in college, but I started with Let's Run in the summer of 2014. I needed an internship to complete my master's degree at Syracuse University. So started working with Let's Run, wrote a couple articles, went to USA's, went to NCAA's, covered a few meets. They liked what they saw, hired me full-time in September 2014. So yeah, I've been with them a little over 8 years now.
That's awesome. That's really cool. And, LetsRun.com, I think, is, before that, was most famous known, me and Hyatt were talking about, for their forums. The forum was a huge deal, especially for high school kids. The forum is both, I feel like, a gift and a curse, because you can get some really great stuff out of that forums. Hyatt, you mentioned that you got some coaching things from the forum. Coaches have really great interactions there. But then you also get high school kids talking about whose PR is trash, who's who's that. So it's kind of a mixed bag. So we're going to have a good time today. We are going to talk about your most recent article. I really want to.
Loved it.
Me and Hyatt both read it. We both talked, and we were kind of throwing around like what we really wanted to talk about. And Hyatt's like, let's just talk about that article. It covers so much, and it does such a good job. So
covers everything that we were going to talk about anyway.
Yeah, it really does. So first, I want, me and Hyatt have talked about the track season. We've talked about a bunch of Diamond League meets as they've come up and things like that, and Worlds and Europeans and all that. And there's been so much that have gone on. I want to get from you, what are your general impressions just overall of the season as you watched it unfold?
I thought it was a lot of fun. And it was interesting because when they announced the schedule for 2022, it was probably last year in 2020, and they said they were going to have World Championships in July, the earliest it's ever been, and then the Commonwealth Games, and then the Europeans. I thought it was a little weird. They were sort of they wanted to make sure these Commonwealth and European Championships were still happening, but also the World Championships is the biggest event in the sport. Shouldn't that be prioritized? I wasn't sure how it was going to work. I thought it worked really well. Because the World Championships were pretty awesome. No, they didn't sell out Hayward Field for every session. but the people who did go there made quite a lot of noise. I think it was a good atmosphere. The Americans crushed it on the track and in the field. So that was great. But then what really amazed me was some of the crowds we got at the Commonwealth Games in Birmingham and then the European Championships in Munich. I think part of that maybe has to do because they were part of like larger multi-sport events, but the passion you had and just the atmosphere, like there was one night in Munich, they had about 5 or 6 big finals. It was the night of the men's and women's 100-meter finals. And I was like, wow, that is one of the best nights of track and field I've seen in a long time. That was better than some of the nights we had at a world championship. And it just made me think that it doesn't just need to be like a world title on the line for people to care about track and field. If there is some sort of title, European, Commonwealth, you've got a couple big stars like Marcel Jacobs, and you've got a lot of fans. That is what this sport needs more of. And it was pretty encouraging, honestly.
I agree with you on every point that you made. The only thing that bothers me, and maybe Alex too, is the fact that you can't sell out a world championship here in the United States. If that was just, like you said, a smaller meet almost anywhere else in the world, every session would have been sold out. It just bothers me that here in this country, we still have such a hard time with promoting this wonderful sport.
Yeah, I think one of the issues you get, I did a lot of thinking about this over the summer. It's like, why can't Eugene sell out a world championships? And then why can't the US a world championships? And I thought one of the things was the price point. I think it was just a little bit too expensive. I think the organizers probably expected that because this was the first US hosted world championships, they could set it wherever they want and people are going to pay it to come, especially because the stadium's pretty small. There aren't that many seats to sell. I don't think that quite worked. I think the other issue is if you look at some of these European cities, Birmingham's in the middle of England. England is smaller than, I think, geographically the state of Alabama. So if you want to get to Birmingham for one day of track and field, pretty much anywhere in the country, it's like a day trip and you're going to be able to manage it. It's not going to be that hard. Same with like Germany's bigger, obviously, but Munich, it's easier to get to Munich from around Germany than it is to get to Eugene from, say, New York City. So I do think that's one of the issues is Eugene's just so remote. There aren't really many large population centers that can just say, hey, let's make a day of it or let's go in for the night. If you're going to get to Eugene, it's going to have to be a multi-day trip. You're probably going to have to get connecting flights. But unfortunately, that's really one of the only tracks, maybe the only track in the country that's capable of hosting world championships in the US right now. So we kind of have to make do with what we've got.
Do you think the lack of how this sport is covered here in America also plays a huge role in that? Like we've been talking for many episodes now about we love the concept of the American Track League, and we think that it being on ESPN can help it, but you need to get your bigger stars to actually go to those meets to help promote it here so that when we do have a world championship, we can certainly have everyone get a lot more excited.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I feel like ESPN in some ways sort of sets the agenda for what's important in this country. Like if they're talking about NBA or NFL, that's what they talk about on First Take. That's what people pay attention to. And they don't really have any track and field conversations. So if you're a sports fan and you're trying to get exposed to new things, you kind of have to go out of your way to do it. Now, that said, you know, we do have the American Track League meets on ESPN, and I think it's great what Paul Doyle's done, and he's got a bunch of other meet directors he works with to try to get that thing exposure. What I see is a couple issues. I mean, the stars not coming. I mean, obviously you'd like to have more stars at every American Track League meet, but I think they do a decent job of getting domestic fields. The one thing I would say is that the broadcast quality is still a little bush league for those meets. And I don't know if improving it would suddenly make everyone want to watch these things or make it way more popular, but it couldn't hurt. And I think that's one step they kind of have to take though.
I think part of the issue with the sport, and we've talked about the marketing aspect ad nauseum. I think also the other part, especially in America, is kind of outside of Sydney McLaughlin. We know who some of the stars are because we like running. The common fan maybe knows who Sydney McLaughlin is. They really, like, if you go to say like Noah Lyles, do they know who Noah Lyles is? They should know who Noah Lyles is, but there's no marketing for it. You know, do they know who a Thing Mo is? Do they know who Devin Allen or any of these, you know, big runners, Michael Norman? They don't know who any of these people are. And I feel like that's the problem. And they're more likely, they're more likely to know like a fringe G League basketball player that, is on a 2-way contract with the Bucks than they are one of the bigger names in track and field. And I'm just curious from your perspective, since, you have dedicated your life to writing about this. What is kind of an answer that maybe you guys have almost thrown around? Because me and Hyde have talked about, we need a big pocket to kind of consolidate and give contracts to these individuals to go to league to say, these are 6 meets in the year that you need to meet if you want to make this amount of money. This is a contract. We need you at these 6 meets. And then we can start promoting these individuals. And I think that would make all the difference, because it doesn't even have to be Sidney McLaughlin. It could be like the American Track League individuals. They're high quality athletes. The times are fairly decent at these meets. There's still world-class times being put down at these meets. But it's the same issue that we always see, where we don't know who's going to these meets. Where Diamond League, there's a ranking system, there's a scoring system. You kind of know at which meet you're going to get the bigger runners. Especially when the points start getting calculated, we know who's in the running for that Diamond League championship. I just feel it's an issue that there is no promotion of athletes or big meets or anything like that in this country to kind of get us to the next step. Yeah.
And Max Siegel, when he spoke at the World Championships in the press conference, he did say they're trying to start a domestic series here next year. We had a couple of meets. We had the Bermuda Games was part of it. Obviously, Bermuda's not in the USA, but also they had the USATF New York City Grand Prix, which I think is good to have a big time track meet in New York, even if, again, wasn't a ton of spectators of that one. So they've announced this sort of strategic plan in the lead up to the 2028 LA Olympics to have a domestic series to get the stars competing at it more often. They're kind of short on specifics beyond that. I asked them, what else are you doing to kind of promote the sport? And they're like, oh, well, yeah, we've got this strategic plan and everything. And they're pretty short on details. But I don't know, the way I see it, I feel like NBC and USATF, they're kind of two of the organizations that need to sort of promote these athletes. And I was pleased to see NBC looks like they're starting up a weekly, Road to Paris show. I don't know how often they're doing it, but they had an interview with Noah Lyles over the weekend in the first episode. And that's great, because Noah Lyles, we know he's an electric personality. If you're getting him in front of mainstream sports fans, like, wait, this guy's the American record holder. He is really exciting to watch. He's got some, he gives some good quotes.
He's great on Twitter.
Everything you want.
Great on Twitter too. I just saw you comment where he's like, I'm going for that double, and you just gave Lane Kiffin eyes, which I loved. I love that. That's one of my favorite memes. So I have a question for you, because maybe I'm a little naive on this. Outside of Icon Stadium in New York City, where else is specifically designed for track meets? Right. Most of the other places, let's go to college, and but Hayward Field's a school. You're now trying if you're the USATF, if you're ATL, if you're any of these companies, you have to pay insurance in order to get athletes on here. There's a lot of overhead in order to get a meet done at a school that already has a bunch of student bodies. Where we've touched on this before, in Europe, you go to a lot of other places that, like track and field, they have track and field specific tracks with beautiful setups for field events, where we don't have those stadiums here. Besides, only one I could think of is kind of Icon in New York City. And maybe there's a few more throughout the country. I just haven't been there. But it's that's the only place I could think, if you're really going to hold one of these big meets and not do it on a college campus or a high school campus like ATL's been doing a lot of. Where else could that be done?
Yeah, I mean, outdoors, I can't really think of many that aren't connected to some sort of educational institution. Now, indoors, it's been pretty good, actually. But it feels like every year you get a new track built. I think the one here in Boston, the track at New Balance, is going to be awesome. That could be the Hayward Field for indoor track.
Certainly.
We've got a bunch of other new venues popping up. There was one in Chicago last year, Spokane. I went there for USA's. That was really nice. So indoors, I actually do think they're doing a pretty good job of it. Yeah. Outdoors, who knows? But then, how are you going to pitch that? You're just going to say, hey, give us a few $1 million to build a pro track and field stadium. I mean, no one's going to want to fund that. There's no revenue, there's nothing in it for them.
It's kind of, do we need the chicken or the egg first? Which one comes first?
And then I always think, whatever happened to the stadium that they had the Olympics in '96 or in Atlanta? What happens to these stadiums? Why are they not still used?
Yeah, that one. Well, the Atlanta Stadium got turned into the Braves Stadium,
Right.
and now they don't even play there. I don't know what happened to it, but that was 25 years ago, and I think now it might be Georgia State's football stadium. I think that's what it is now.
Good use, great use of it. So, we got a little off track, which I think is okay, but the general impressions and, just from me in all my years, and I think this is one of the better seasons I've ever seen overall in the world. We've seen multiple records go down. We've seen fierce competition. We've seen some new faces popping up. And we have a few, I'd say 2 people that arguably are going to go down as the greatest in their events ever, between Sydney McLaughlin and Mondo Duplantis. So talk a little bit. I'm curious, if you had to pick an MVP this year that was, the most outstanding athlete that continued to just be excellent and do it, there's a lot of names to choose from. Who would you throw down as your unabashed MVP ahead of the rest?
That's a tough one because, like you said, we had Mondo setting a bunch of world records and he competed a lot. We had Sydney McLaughlin. She didn't compete much, but she was amazing when she did. Probably the single most impressive performance of the year. And then you had Shelly-Ann Fraser-Pryce, who greatest 100-meter sprinter in history with her greatest season. And she doesn't break the world record. She doesn't even PR, but she runs in the 10.6s week in, week out. It just took the consistency is amazing. Now, I don't know. I feel like
disclaimer to any of you runners or anyone listening: if Jonathan doesn't pick you, please still give him the interview. He's not being mean.
Yeah, just gotta be objective here. I feel like Mondo.
Yes.
There's the world record indoors, world record outdoors. It was the final thing of each session, and he just ended it in the perfect fashion. He only lost once all year. He did set another world record indoors before the World Championships. I think I have to give him the edge over Shelly-Ann Fraser-Pryce just because of those world records. So I think I'm going to go Mondo.
I would agree. It's strictly because of one main point that you said. He competed almost every single week. Sydney was amazing, but I think she ran like 4 or 5 times all season. So it's kind of hard to give the MVP. I like to go with the person who's there all the time, who's consistent, who's competing week in and week out.
Now, where does Matt Nielsen fit into that? Who ended up finishing second consistently to Mondo Duplantis? I think I got his name right.
Chris Nielsen.
Chris Nielsen. Sorry, Chris. Chris Nielsen, who consistently finished second, I think, almost in most meets to Mondo. Does he get like Mr. Consistent outside of Mondo in terms of part of me feels bad for the guy because he would be winning a lot more if Mondo Duplantis didn't exist right now.
Yeah, I mean, he wouldn't be breaking records or anything like that, but yeah, he's the second best pole vaulter in the world, and it's in some ways you're like you can't feel that sorry for the guy. He's still like amazing. He's still getting all these medals. He's showing up, performing, but yeah, he certainly would get a lot more attention, especially he's an American. An American being best in the world around here, we would talk about him a lot more. So yeah, it's a little unfortunate that he has to overlap with probably the greatest pole vaulter we've ever seen.
Yeah.
But that's sometimes how it goes. It's like at least you feel for Dalila Muhammad because she at least got her time at the top, and then Sydney took over. Chris has been competing as Mondo in since college, beat him. If you remember, Mondo's only year in the NCAA, Chris Nielsen was the NCAA champion that year outdoors. But it's going to take maybe a Mondo injury or something for Chris Nielsen to ever win a global title because Mondo is just redefining what's possible in this event.
Yeah, he's incredible. He's absolutely incredible. So I'm going to lay the gauntlet down for you right here just for fun because why not? Sydney McLaughlin or Thing Mo Open 400? Who do you have?
I'm taking Sydney.
Me too.
Because, we saw a Thing Mo run the 400 last year, right? And she was really good, 49.5. I think she really focused on it, could go a little faster, but Sydney, I'm very confident could run sub 49. Maybe if you put her on the track, like this year, I'm pretty sure she could have run sub 49 this year. So I would love to see it. That's what I think would be great for the sport is if at the 2023 Worlds in Budapest or the 2024 Olympics in Paris, we get those two and Shawnee Miller-Weibo all scoring off in the 400. But yeah, I'm taking Sydney.
Me too.
And Femke. We got to throw Femke Bol in there. She needs to be included in there. So that kind of segues into our next thing. Best newcomer. Best newcomer breaking onto the scene. There's a few candidates there. We mentioned Femke. Arian Knighton can certainly be somebody that would be included. Who do you have kind of as the best newcomer breaking on here?
Yeah, I guess, I don't know. I gave a similar award in my article to not Femke Bolt, to Toby Amazon. I don't know if you consider her a newcomer because she's been on the circuit for a couple of years, but the way she made the leap from, pretty good. She was an NCAA champion, fourth of the Olympics, to now 12-12 in the 100-meter hurdles and the fastest of all time. I don't know. Is that a cheat, or does that count?
No, that counts because it's kind of breaking into that world class. Because if you're just kind of, and this is not to be mean to any of the people that kind of qualify for meets, but then don't really to have any spotlight. Toby's done that. She did float around for a little. Now she did break in. So I certainly consider her a best newcomer because now we have to see what she does next year and the following years. It'll be exciting to see her. Anyone else that you have that kind of would throw into that group of top newcomers that we should be looking forward to?
I think Mary Moraa. I would give her a shout out. She was the bronze medalist in the World Championships, the 800 meters. She beat Keely Hodgkinson in the Commonwealth Games to gold and won the Diamond League final as well. She's a couple years older than Hodgkinson and Mo. She's 22, but she's not someone who had really been on that many people's radar until this year. And suddenly she's taken what we thought was a 2-horse race in the women's 800 and turned it into a 3-horse race. Now, obviously, I think Mo hasn't lost either of them yet, Hodgkinson or Moraa, but she really went from someone only diehard track fans would have known a year ago to now someone, if you're watching a Diamond League, she's one of the stars. So I'd say Mary Moraa.
Certainly.
After reading your article, I just want to start off kind of where you started off. Ingebrigtsen. I mean, how great of a season do you think that he had? And can we start to put him in that same level as Legat and El Garouge, or do you think that he still needs more time to prove himself?
I think he's getting there. The thing we had from Legat and El Garouge is they didn't just have 1 year of this. They were at the very top for a couple of years. And we're a few now. I mean, 2020, I think he would have been probably the second best guy in the world if there was an Olympics that year. He did win the Olympics last year, and now he's the world champion in the 5,000, silver in the 1,500. Yeah, I think we're starting to see that he's going to be the El Garouge or the Legat of the 2020s. And it's not that he's not unbeatable. We've seen it. Jake Whiteman beat him at the World Championships. But I do think he's the best guy in those rabbited Diamond League races, which is the majority of the races that we see these days. The question is he going to get, so good that he can do the same thing at Worlds and just blast away from everyone like Timothy Cheruiyot did in 2019 at the World Championships? Still one of the most impressive 1,500 performances I've ever seen in Doha. So, yeah, I think he's definitely getting to that level.
Is that kind of – go ahead, Dave.
What do you think about his claim that he might try the triple at the Worlds, 5, 10, and 15?
I think it's fascinating to see if he actually attempts it. And the thing though that was brought up, there was a message board thread about this because I was sort of saying, well, athletics, you need to change the schedule. I had this whole article. It's very simple.
Yep, we read that.
Yeah, they just have to move the 1,500 round back a day, the semifinals, and it'll be fine. But the interesting thing is, look at what happened to Sifan Hassan. Sifan Hassan, one of the best runners in the world. She does the triple in Tokyo. It goes very well. She gets 2 golds and a bronze. But it totally destroys her. Emotionally, physically, it's just so grueling that she basically doesn't run until May of this year. And when she does come back, she's not quite the same runner. Now, I think she'll probably be back to normal next year. We started to see flashes of it at the end of this season. But it's a big ask to go 3 different distance events. You've got prelims in 2 of them to put all that energy into doing it, like in the world, especially just at the World Championships and not an Olympics. Will he really risk what happened to Sifan Hassan the year before an Olympic year? I don't know. So the fan in me wants to see him do it, But if I was coaching him, I'd be like, oh, Jakob, maybe we save this until Paris or something like that, because you're worried about the long-term effects.
Yeah, I have two questions to go with Ingebrigtsen. One, is his beatability have to kind of do with his age? Because, he's running a lot more, the 5K and 1500, much more tactical races. So you can slip up and lose in those races. And it's not like he's getting blown his doors off and he's finishing back of the pack. He's getting second place. Would you equate that to kind of his age and kind of his inexperience at running at these world levels consistently like this? And number two, second question for you to consider, could Mo Farah in his peak have done the triple and been successful?
I don't think Mo could have done the triple because I don't think he was good enough in the 1500. He was a time trialer. He could run 328, but I don't think he was out kicking those guys. So, yeah, I'll answer that and say, no, I don't think Mo could have. But with Jakob, I think, the bigger thing that has to do with why he got beat in Eugene is it's very hard to run away from people the way he did. I think tactically he made an error in trying to push on and take the lead early in the race or midway through the race when he had Timothy Jerriott willing to kind of keep pushing the pace for him. And I don't know, that might come a little bit with not being as many finals, but he'd already run the World Championship final in 2019. He'd run the Olympic final in 2021. He played that very well. He won the Olympics at age 20. So I think it was more just a tactical error, and I don't know if it was because he didn't have the experience. I just think it was kind of he made a mistake. And the other thing is the 5,000. I don't think anyone's beating him in any kind of race right now. You could throw him in. I just watched that race in Eugene, and I'm just like, incredible. How does anyone beat that man in a 5,000? I don't see it.
Can't.
No shot. We'll keep going with the article a little. Dave, we've talked about this a little bit. U.S. middle distance.
Men's side. Men.
What's going on right now outside of Grant Fisher? What's up with U.S. middle distance?
I don't know. It's funny. I was rereading that article this evening. I was just looking at that section. I'm like, I didn't realize how bad this year was until I actually dug into the numbers. And I was like, wait a minute. America didn't have a single 800-meter semifinalist on the men's side. They only have one guy in the 1500 final, and he finished 12th.
How long has it been since America hasn't at least had somebody in the semi? Because we've gone from Nick Simmons, we had Dwayne Solomon, we've had it's just been a constant, at least somebody threatening that's running a sub 144 and at least putting themselves in the mix. Yeah. Do you have any knowledge or any in your head? Can you think how long has it been since we haven't had someone at least in the semis?
It's never happened. This was the first year. I looked it up. I was going through every World Championships before, and this is the first time it's ever happened. So, I don't know. I think I don't want to totally sound the panic alarm. Obviously, this year wasn't good if you're an American middle distance fan. Outside of, Grant Fisher, you might count who was just long distance.
Yeah, it's
amazing. But what I think people need to remember is think of all the young talent America has right now and how many of them were banged up at some point this year. Yari Naguse, Cole Hawker, Cooper Tier, Donovan Brazier, all of them really super talents. All of them were hurt for significant portions or important portions of the 2022 season. So I think all of those guys are athletes who could be contending for medals at a global championship down the road. We've seen Brazier win one already. They just need to stay healthy. And I think for the other three, I'm fairly optimistic about it. For Brazier, I'm starting to get worried because we saw in 2021, he shows up to the Olympic trials, but his foot wasn't ready. And, he finishes dead last in the final. 2018, he had to shut that season down after indoors because he got hurt. And it's just unfortunate because he's an electric talent and he doesn't need a lot of training to get up to that high level. But he needs to stay somewhat healthy, and he hasn't been able to do that the last few years.
And also, you never know how anything's going to pan out in the future. But when you have a season where you have 4 high school kids break 4 minutes and 2 high school kids break 147, you got to think some of that talent's going to pan out into something.
Yeah, for sure. Cade Flatt, really great season. Colin Solomon, Gary Martin, all these guys. And then we got a couple of juniors doing it as well.
Yeah.
I think some of it's the super shoes, but also in a few years, these guys are going to be pretty good.
Shoes definitely.
Certainly. I get concerned with Donovan Brazier because, yes, he's had the injuries. I also think it's a little bit mental at this point with him. And I'm starting to question a little bit, it's tough to question someone's mental toughness when they run an 800 for a living because you have to be a mentally tough person to do it. But I do think that the doubts kind of creep in sometimes. And I'm waiting for him to get kind of, he has competed at a high level. He's won. He's been successful. But we need that Michael Norman moment for him to kind of come in. Michael Norman had his moment this year where we have to see if he sustains it. And he now can continue to be the dominant 400-meter runner in the world. But I think Donovan kind of needs that regeneration of him because he has the ability. I think he has the ability to be the greatest 800-meter runner in the history of the United States. He has that physical gifts. But, man, we just need to see him out there. Like, I love Donovan Brazier coming up. And now it's just kind of every time he steps out there in a meet, you question who you're going to get. What are you going to see there?
I don't know if I feel that way because I feel like if we get a healthy Donovan Brazier, I'm pretty sure what we're going to get. And we just haven't we saw it a little bit indoors this year. He was running the 400, but he looked pretty good at USA indoors to me. And I was like, hey, this is great. He was feeling good. I do agree early in his career. I do think he might have had some, I don't know if I would call it struggles with mental toughness, but just it was difficult. He was being thrown into a difficult environment at a young age, and he didn't always respond in the best ways. I think he's better in that department now. I just think his body isn't allowing him to do the things he wants to do. And the way he reacted at the Olympic trials when he finished faded to last place after being on the team with 200 to go, I was actually really impressed by his post-race press conference. He gave, he sat there, he took everything. It was an emotional moment, but he didn't storm off or anything, which is something he might have done as a younger athlete. So I think mentally, I feel pretty good about him. It's physically, I'm just worried.
And last for me about the middle distance, Matty Centrowitz, how much more are we going to get out of him? 33 years old. That's not young in running, especially. Usually guys turn in their mid-30s and they're like, cool, time to go marathoning. So how much more are we going to kind of see out of Matty Centrowitz where, Hyatt correctly points out possibly one of the best tacticians we've ever seen in terms of the 1500. Like his talent isn't necessarily blowing your doors off. It's making you run his race, which for some reason, people love to run Matty Centrowitz's races for him, and then he just goes and beats him in the end. But what else do we see out of Matty Centrowitz in the tank coming off of his injury now?
So that's a huge question, right? I think he's got at least one more U.S. team in him. Like, we look at Evan Jager. Now, the steeplechase isn't quite the same as the 1500, but Jager, I totally wrote off. And I was just like, nope, sorry, he's lost it. It's been too much time away. He just can't stay healthy. He didn't look good early this season, and then he comes in, makes the team, finishes sixth in the world. So Centrowitz, he's dealt with injuries throughout his career. I don't think he's dealt with an injury as serious as this one, where he has to go get the knee surgery. But I don't know. He posts a lot on Instagram, and I feel like he's got that dog in him. He's still got, like, I want to show these young guys, they're coming in, Kupatia, Cole Hawker, the young Oregon guys, they're taking over the event. But I'm the Olympic champ, I've got 5 U.S. titles. I'm not done. So I think he's got one more team in him, and I just hope he's healthy next year so we can see him go at them. Because remember, last year, we're only a year away from him running 3:49. He gets second, finishes just behind Cole Hawker in the Olympic trials final. Those two were way better than everyone else in that race. That was only 1 year ago. So I do feel pretty good about his chances of getting back and making a team if he can stay healthy next year.
I don't think 33 is that old. I mean, there's been plenty of people run the 15. Look at Bernard Lagat. He had a great career after the age of 33. So I don't think age is too much of a factor. I just think it's the injuries.
Yeah. Nick Willis, too. I think he had to be around 33 years old when he got the medal in Rio. So he's another one.
All those Irish guys have been great.
Yeah, Nick Willis is a freak, though. Nick Willis was a freak of nature. Let's jump into, we're just kind of going through your article, but your article was so good and I loved it. Let's go through, the American sprinting side of it. You had a lot of positives to say about American sprinting, and man, they deserved it. If people did watch Worlds, Yeah, it was the American Sprinting Show. Talk about kind of, American Sprinting coming back, and what can we expect going forward with them? Do we think we're going to continue to see kind of them put the world on notice, continue some more, or what do we got coming from them?
I think next year is going to be a test, because I was praising them, and rightly so. They won every individual sprint event on the men's side except for the 400 hurdles, and they took an all-time performance from Alison Dos Santos. They swept the 100 and a 200 with three entirely different guys in each event. That's pretty incredible. So we've got a lot of talent in those events right now, and they delivered on the biggest stage this year. But you got to remember who wasn't in those races, right? Of the Olympic champions from last year, only one of those guys actually ran in the final in Eugene, and it was Karsten Warholm, and he wasn't close to 100%. We saw that. Yeah. So I think what's going to be fascinating is if those guys, that's Stephen Gardner in the 400, Andre de Grasse, Marcel Jacobs, Hansel Parchment, Karsten Warholm, if all those guys are healthy in Budapest next year and going back against the Americans, then what happens? Because we saw in Tokyo, the Americans, a lot of them were in those races and got beat by those guys.
Yep.
And then this year they show up, and a lot of them ran better this time around. So maybe it would have been different, but we don't know. So look, America is still the dominant sprint country in the world on the men's side. And that's going to be the same whether they're getting silver and gold, or if it's just all gold in Budapest next year. But I think it's going to be exciting, because you want to have them facing the world's best. We didn't quite get to see that. And when you remove the best guy in every event, the second guy in all these events was American. But now you throw the best guy back in. Is the best guy actually American, or is it the guy we had back in? So I'm going to be excited to see.
I said something probably about 1 or 2 episodes ago, and all of my friends are like, "You're crazy." I said, Fred Curley, to me, could be one of the best all-around sprinter that we've ever seen. Has there ever been anybody who's run 43.6, 19.6, and 9.7? Anybody who has those 3 PRs, to me, that's just fascinating.
I don't think so. We've seen guys who've run fast in the 100. Michael Norman has done it. Wade Van Niekerk's done it, but not 9.76, So yeah, I don't know. It kind of depends on what you value, but
all around,
Fred Curley medaled in the 400 in 2019. Then he comes out and wins the 100 in 2022. So I don't think no one's ever done that. So
I think he's vastly underrated in terms of.
Fred Curley's fantastic.
He has such great range.
Yeah.
Are we writing off Christian Coleman for the foreseeable future? Do we see a comeback story for Christian Coleman? Because he had such promise. It was amazing to watch him and Noah Lyles go at it. And then Arian Knighton was on the back burner in high school, getting ready to burst in. And I think every running fan was like, this is going to be amazing. We're going to have Coleman and Lyles going back and forth, Knighton trying to go against him. And then Coleman ran into all of his things. And now he's a shell of himself when he does compete. But do we see a redemption story with Christian Coleman? I'm hoping you're positive on that.
Yeah, I'm not totally writing him off. The guy, I think he's 25 or 26. Yeah. So I wasn't sure how this year was going to go. I could totally, heading into 2022, I thought, hey, this guy could just show up again and he's the man. And it's exactly where we left off in 2019. Or it could be, he's been away from the sport for a couple of years, and it might be an adjustment period. And it was the latter. And he got beat at World Indoors in his specialty event by Marcel Jacobs, shows up pretty underwhelming at the U.S. Championships. Well, he doesn't run the final, but and underwhelming at Worlds, he doesn't medal. So, yeah, I'm sure there are going to be some people who totally write him off, but he's also a guy, he's already medaled in the 100 at Worlds twice. 9.76, that's the same as Bromell and Curley. They all have the same PB.
Yep.
Can he get back there? I'm not writing him off yet. If he has another bad year next year, maybe I say, okay, this whole whereabouts thing screwed up his career, totally ruined his career. But I still am going to back the talent that he could do something special next year.
Can we shift over to the ladies for a second in the sprinting? outside of Sydney McLaughlin, we've had a lot of good performers, but Jamaica's been dominating the 1 and the 2. We saw the emergence of Abby Steiner coming up, and she ran a lot this year. And I think she gave a lot of gutsy performances during the championship. So I think her legs were a little burnt out by that point. She ran really well, but you could see she was working towards the end there. Where are the women? Are they going to catch up, you think, coming closer to Jamaica right now? Because Jamaica has, Fraser Price, Sharika Jackson. They have a lot of, Thompson Herrera still very good. Can we see the women kind of take another step and really start competing there? Or are we just looking at kind of Jamaican dominance again for another year?
I think the problem for the Americans is the Jamaicans they're going up against are some of the greatest sprinters the sport's ever seen. Kellyanne Fraser-Price, Elaine Thompson, and now Sharika Jackson, who's number 2 all-time in the 200.
Yeah.
Like, if you want to compete with these women, you have to be running ridiculous times. And really the only American I see right now who might be capable of getting that is Sha'Carri Richardson. And we don't know if she's got her, she hasn't had her head screwed on straight for a couple of the big meets this year. But she's the one who I think talent-wise might be able to get there. But otherwise, I think you might have to bank on the Jamaicans just getting a little older or, not running at historically great levels. Because if it's going to take 10-6 or 21-4 to win these events, I just don't think the Americans right now are good enough to do that.
Really quick, Jonathan, can you talk to somebody in Sha'Carri's camp and just tell her to stay off social media and don't read the news and stop doing all of it? Because I feel like she does get in her own head. And like you said, she's unbelievably talented. But then I just see some of her tweets and I see what she's falling into, like the me against the world. And I get it. I think she's gotten a raw shake with a lot of the national media and a lot of things going on. But man, what she could be, just stay off social media, Sha'Carri. Just go be you and go crush it. Because I agree with you. She's like America's hope against a Jamaican juggernaut going on right now. Sorry, Dave.
No, I'm just saying, I feel like we've been waiting for Shelly and Fraser Price to get old for about 10 years now. She's just she's just a freak, and I don't see her slowing down.
Yeah, I know. I was messaging with her agent Paul Doyle last week, and he was just like, "Yeah, we keep waiting for Father Time to come and catch her, and just hasn't showed up yet." Usually this is around the time that it starts happening to sprinters, and it hasn't. So, but she's still excited. She still wants to run 10.5, so she's going to be motivated going into next year. And with Sha'Carri, look, I'm not going to go in there and tell her how to live her life. She can do her own thing, but I do think she is a huge talent. It would be a shame to see it squandered. I think it'd be nice to have another couple veteran people from the sport to just offer her some advice and try to get her going in the right direction. People she might be able to be willing to take advice from. Because she has a lot of talent. She has a big personality. She can be a great thing for the sport, but you can't be going out in the first round of USA's in the 100 like that. It's just, it's a shame to see that.
It really is. Yeah. Off topic a little bit here. What do you think of the pacer lights that they had, where they would show the world record on the lights and the pacer on the track? What did you think of those? I hated those.
I don't like them for every race, but for the record attempts, I actually do like them because I think it's led to some fast times. It helps the fans see exactly, if you're in the stadium, you don't have to do math and figure out, or if you're watching on TV, say that's what I like. Oh, are they exactly on this pace or what? You can just say, oh, they're on the lights. The record chase is still on. So if you're making this thing into a record attempt, yes, I love them. For regular Diamond League races, I don't think you need them for most of the time.
I love it for fans watching it on TV. To me, it is the equivalent of when the NFL put the yellow line for the first down marker. You know exactly where they have to be and what they have to do. Now, if I was in a race, I don't know if that might interfere with how I was running the actual race, but for a fan, I think it's absolutely perfect.
We're going to continue jumping down here. You had Femke Bolin here. You had a thank you for racing award, which I found interesting. I want you to talk about what went into the thought process of the thank you for racing award, because I thought it was a pretty nifty bit of writing you did here.
Wonderful. Yeah.
Well, we just complain, I feel like all of us in the media about, this star's not showing up to this meet and this person's not going here. I know maybe that's just the way I think about it, because I know I talk about that with my boss, Rowan Weldon Johnson, on the Let's Run Track Talk podcast that I do. We're always talking about, like, why isn't this person showing up? Oh, it'd be the Diamond League final would be so much better if this person was here. So I just wanted to shout out someone who actually embodies all the things we asked athletes to do, which was Femke Bol. She shows up, she runs multiple events at every big event. She runs World Indoors, she runs World Outdoors, she runs Euros, she runs the Diamond League, and she does them all really, really well. So I wanted to say, hey, first, this was a really impressive season, even though she got the pants beat off her in the World Championship final. That's Sydney. What can you do?
Yeah.
Everything else, she was phenomenal. And I also think it's good because it shows some of these other athletes that, hey, if you're really good, you actually can run all these events and run them at a high level. It's not just going to ruin you for the end of the season, because she was running great indoors. She ran great in the middle of the outdoor season. She ran great at the end of the outdoor season. So I just wanted to give her some acknowledgement for that.
And then on the absolute contrast, you have your Harry Houdini Award. I was shocked. I live in New Jersey, where I think Mo and Sydney McLaughlin are from. So, like, I have a lot of pride in them. I just would have loved to have seen them race more. And Mo, we didn't see. She didn't run one race after the World Championships. Like, is there any reason? Like, did you ever hear any reason why she just stopped running for the season? Was she hurt? I mean, I didn't hear anything. So I'm just curious, if you know anything, or that was just a choice that her and her camp made.
I reached out to her agent and he didn't respond to me. So I think that's the frustrating aspect for some of the fans, is not just that they're not racing, but we don't even really know why. Like Sydney McLaughlin and I think Mo, two of the biggest stars, McLaughlin ran one race after the World Championships. Mo ran none. And I follow the sport for a living. I don't know why they shut down their seasons. They have provided zero explanation. So I feel like that's just kind of a bummer for fans not to see them compete, and then also not to know. Like, look, if there's some personal issue they're dealing with, they don't need to come out and say, like, hey, this is XYZ happened. They can just say, hey, I'm dealing with a personal matter, or hey, I had a great season, accomplished all I wanted to. I feel like I need a break. It's been mentally or physically stressful for me, and I'm going to end my season. I think people can understand that, but when you just have them not competing at all, it's just a little frustrating, I think, for fans.
Absolutely.
It certainly is. And, I want to pick your brain about that, because you've been doing this for a living for a little bit. And I remember as a runner, I ran in college, Dave ran in college, you also ran. One of the best parts about it was competing. And it wasn't, I don't want to train all the time. Like, don't get me wrong. Some of the training sessions as you get into college are great because it's a good bonding session with your teammates. You go through a grueling interval session, and it's like, all right, we got through it. We did it together. Like, some of that's great, but nothing's better than competing. You've been looking at this. What goes into the mindset when certain people become pros, or even in college when they know they're going to get to that level, and then they really become picky and choosy, and there's a lot more training time? Do you feel, is that more the athlete or the coach, or a combination of both, that kind of, I guess, comes into a kind of like a protectionist way of just kind of like protecting themselves and really being methodical and picking their spots?
I think it's usually the coach. That's my experience dealing with athletes. Is most athletes who get to this high level have a lot of trust in their coach, especially when they're performing really well. They will listen to whatever the coach says. And if the coach says, hey, we're going to focus, we're going to put all our eggs in the World Championship or Olympic basket, and we're not going to pay attention to anything else, the athlete, they'll buy in. And you need to do that as a good athlete, to buy into your coach and what they're selling. But if the coach believes that's the only thing that matters, that's what's going to happen with the athlete, and they're not going to race as much. So and look, you can't argue with the results. Look at what Sydney McLaughlin's done at the World Championships. Look what I think Mo has done at the Olympics and the World Championships. Their coaches obviously know what they're doing.
Oh, yeah.
But I think that sort of mindset, and also like Sydney, look, I'd like to see her running these Diamond Leagues. I think it would be great if she ran into the 400, but what are we going to see from her in a Diamond League 400-meter hurdle that we haven't already seen? When you get to that event, she's basically destroyed her event. There's no worlds left for her to conquer. And so I could say, well, all right, yeah, it'd be kind of fun to see her stomp everyone, but maybe she might not view it that way. Like, why would she care about going there and running 51 seconds and just obliterating the field? Like, these athletes, they're driven by, they have goals, and she's accomplished like a lot of them. And so much so that most people in the sport now think she either needs to take on a second event or lead the event she's in because it's no longer interesting or competitive. And I think she kind of feels the same way. She needs something else to challenge her. So is running a few extra meets in Europe after Worlds really going to challenge her? Not in the 400-meter hurdles. So I can understand maybe why she might skip it from that perspective. Are
you surprised that sponsors don't have more of an issue with these athletes not running more races?
A little bit, and maybe, is that telling that the exposure they're getting from running professional track meets outside of the World Championships or something like that really isn't that much? Like New Balance will still use Sydney in marketing campaigns. Gatorade she's still in Gatorade commercials. Like she's got 1 million followers on Instagram or something like that. Like they still have ways of getting her out into the public eye. And running in a Diamond League race, is that going to get that in front of that many fans or that many potential customers? Maybe not. So they might think, hey, if you're doing what we're paying you to do, and you're getting all these accolades next to your name, world record holder, Olympic champion, that you don't need to show up to every race. We can just pump you up in other ways,
Right.
Yeah, we certainly need a few billionaires with deep pockets to contract a bunch of these athletes and say, hey, these are where we're going to put you. And again, I think it will be, maybe not for a Sydney McLaughlin, even though I think she would also benefit with a lot of money. If the American market ever really found a way to get fans, they would make money like no other. Because one thing we've seen is when Americans really start to like something, the money that athletes can make is absolutely incredible. So look at the NFL, NBA, MLB. And I think if American runners really thought about that a little more, they might want to put their eggs into more of a basket and maybe, okay, let's maybe unionize. So let's maybe push to get a circuit where, and it doesn't have to be that many meets, and it maybe doesn't have to be like that much money right away, but it'll probably be significantly more than what they make, a lot of them, because a lot of them aren't winning the Diamond League. You know what I mean? And a lot of them aren't getting these big time sponsorship deals. So that's, I've been pushing that for a few episodes, but I really think that it would benefit everybody if they really thought about it that way.
Yeah, it's hard to do for sure to get something like that off the ground, but I do think one point you made is like, if America really likes a sport, it takes off, and the TV contracts get that much bigger, and everyone else gets that more wealthy within the sport. And the interesting thing is, like, what American sports fans really like? Sports where Americans are the best.
Yeah,
and that's what you have in track and field. America is the superpower in track and field. So, you do have that. That's a nice little bonus with trying to make track popular.
Well, even look at soccer. Soccer is not even a big sport in this country, but MLS has been expanding. They're getting more deals. They're adding teams. You don't add teams unless you're making money. And if anybody's watching MLS, I'm a freak and I watch a ton of sports, but the MLS quality is getting significantly better. There's a lot of steps that need to be taken, but it's getting better and it's getting there. And I think that's an example that track could take where there's a grind to be had. But if you start to do it and do it the right way, you can start to really get something going there. And I think they would be bigger than soccer in like 5 years easily and challenging some of the bigger leagues. I really think that they could do it, especially like you said, we're the dominant group there. And I think you'd have internationals knocking on the doors, and the Diamond League would be pissed if Americans actually put their what Americans do best and just throw money at something and make it work. So I don't know. Last thing I want to ask you, how much do you pay attention to the college circuit? I think you do a good amount. Do you see anybody up and coming that we should be thinking of next year popping into the scene that maybe a lot of people don't know about in terms of track and field?
It's always interesting because, I feel like I don't start learning about the next big thing until like January or February when they start running these fast indoor times. And then you're like, oh, this is going to be someone we're going to pay attention to. I mean, usually the way to do it is to look at whoever was maybe 4th or 5th at NCAAs last year as like a freshman or sophomore. Yeah. Those are the ones that are going to pop off. But I do have one guy in mind. and that's Mekhi Williams. And I don't know if it counts as like sort of a breakthrough because I think most U.S. track fans already know about him. But he's coming back to Oregon. We saw what he did the last couple of years. Obviously, he disappointed at NCAAs, but he was very good at the U.S. Championships and the Olympic trials the year before that. And he's just a huge talent. So I think he could be the man in NCAA track this year if all goes according to plan for him.
Certainly. Dave, you have anything else that you want to go for? Because I have one last thing I want to ask him about.
Yeah, I just have one thing. It's kind of something that we've discussed quite a bit on this podcast. Do you, what's your opinion on most of these Diamond League meets just being only available on Peacock, which is a paid service, as opposed to trying to find them somewhere where they can watch it on regular broadcast TV?
I think it's always better if you're going to have it on a TV network. But I'm just grateful that Americans have a way to watch it. And it's not that complicated. Like Peacock is fairly affordable, and it's going to be, every meet is going to be on Peacock. It's not one of these things where you're looking across all different networks, or is it going to be here? Like there might be some meets that are televised on USA or on CNBC, but they're all going to be available on Peacock, and you get the international feed, which is great because I really like the announcers, and there's no commercials. So
that's so much better.
It's great to have a meet like this on TV, but I think American fans are kind of fortunate. Peacock, it's a fairly high quality product and it's fairly affordable. So I don't think it's the worst thing in the world for that to be the home of track and Diamond League track and field in the US.
Yeah, the world feed is key because a lot of times we always say when it's on NBC, they just throw too much of that fluff in there for the diehard fan, like all the personal bios, which I get from a marketing standpoint. But when you're just trying to watch the race and they only show 3 or 4 laps of the 5K, it gets kind of frustrating. So I do like the fact that they do use the world feed and they actually show pretty much the meet in its entirety. And that's wonderful to watch.
The last thing I want to jump into, I want to get your opinion. World standards for 2023. Hyatt thinks they're too hard. I love them because I think you get the world's best because of this. I know they've definitely jumped up in difficulty, but what do you think about the world standards?
They're hard, but they're hard for a reason. World Athletics really wants to go for these world rankings. They want to use the world rankings to pick the world championship teams or the entrance in a lot of events. And the way you do that is you have to keep setting higher standards because clearly the athletes keep rising to the bar. And for the very, very best athletes, it's not going to change anything. They're still going to be there. But I'm going to be interested to see how it works out because this year we still had a lot of athletes hitting the standards in a lot of events, and it's not going to be the case next year. And I want to see how it affects the team selection. Is the U.S. sending a team that, that's doing what they did in the men's 1500 this year, but in multiple events, where they're sending, first and sixth and third or something like that, because not enough people have a high enough world ranking. So I don't mind it, but I also I'm not sure what it's going to look like. Is this going to hurt some of the college kids who might be really, really good, but not have quite the high enough world ranking because these college races don't get taken into account, like Jonathan Davis we saw earlier this year in the 1500. So I don't mind it, but I'm also curious. I'll be watching closely to see what happens.
Yeah, I definitely think that it could certainly hurt the chance of an athlete running multiple events because they would have to get the standard in both events. So, can Ingebrigtsen get the qualifier in all three? I mean, he can, but he's going to have to run 3 fast races and then still try to have his training ready for that time to run the triple. So I do think that from a fan's perspective, it could hurt that. And there are some smaller countries that might not, they won't have athletes feel what it's like to be in the World Championships because they might not have anybody who has the chance to make it in. But that's just me.
Yeah, Hyatt's a little more of a romantic thinking about the smaller countries. I just think if you're not fast enough, you don't go. That's just me. I'm kind of a jerk in that sense. But yeah, I think that wraps up this episode. Jonathan, thanks so much for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
We're both looking forward to this so much. I don't think it's disappointed at all.
Oh, it was a pleasure. I feel like, an hour flew by. So I really enjoyed talking track with you guys. I'm happy to come back anytime.
Wonderful.
Yeah, it certainly did. Again, Jonathan Gault, staff writer at letsrun.com. He's been gracious enough to bless me to come on two separate podcasts. It's great. He's one of the most accessible people that you can find. I don't know if he wants me to let that cat out of the bag, but he's nice enough to answer messages if you would just message him. Not a lot of people with the check mark on Twitter answer messages. So Jonathan's a good one. Everyone, really appreciate you all from listening. Talking Novels podcast. Find us on Twitter at Talking Novels. Jonathan, anything you want to shout out before we go?
No, I mean, like I said, you can find my work at letsrun.com. I do a weekly podcast as well. It's the letsrun.com Track Talk podcast. So if you enjoy Talking Novels, I think you might enjoy that one as well. So that's my plug. But yeah, just thank you for having me. And I'm still working on that blue check mark. I do not have it on Twitter. So
I thought you had it. They didn't give it to you yet?
No, maybe once I get it, I'll become big time and start ignoring everyone. But till then, I have to be accessible.
Oh, that's terrible. I really thought you had a blue check mark. Twitter, what are you doing? I mean, that's a lot of questions we can ask Twitter there. So I digress. Wrong podcast for that. But anyway, everyone, again, thank you so much. Hyatt, as always, we'll be back next week. Like, share, follow, subscribe, rate 5 stars, spread this word of mouth, and maybe Jonathan's podcast might be a notch above ours. We'll let it go there. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. So long, everybody.